It is Friday afternoon. You know what time it is. It's time for the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, that is the fighter, Pete Rogers Jr. I am Jason Floyd. We're here to break down UFC Vegas 86. Goes down tomorrow inside the UFC Apex there in Las Vegas, Nevada. Lock time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, which I'm pretty sure it's the lock time. I'm pretty sure it's the right time I saw there. Of course, we've got 14 fights to break down over the next hour or so. Of course, if you have any questions, comments for the show, you can leave those right there in the YouTube chat. Also, you can join our Discord channel. Totally free to join. Great conversation. I know we already got some questions that have been lined up inside that chat, so a great way to get your question on these fights as we're doing some fights. And Pete, I mentioned this on my podcast last night. It's actually, I'm kind of surprised that we didn't get more of a name value card here on Saturday, just because of with the Super Bowl being in Las Vegas, this event being in Las Vegas. I would have thought we would have got a little bit more name value.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought so as well. I mean, it's difficult to have crazy name value across tons of fight cards because of the amount of Apex shows we're having, right? It is kind of what it is, and it's a week-to-week, debate, and it's like, we're happy to have fights, but at the same time, it's lower level with guys not with the best strength of schedule or people getting opportunities that 5-10 years ago would have never graced the octagon, but it is what it is, and I'm thankful to have some type of fights because outside the UFC, I mean, nobody else is doing it. Nobody else is doing it like they are, and I am grateful.
Yeah, as we mentioned about last week, we're in this run of 11 straight weeks of UFC events. The next UFC event that we will not have a week will be April the 20th. Of course, we're here every week when there is a UFC event to break down the card, primarily from a daily fantasy sports perspective, but also break it down from a sports betting perspective as well. Of course, we've got our DraftKings contest is up right here in the show notes. You can click on that contest, get in that contest, and congratulations to our winner last week, who, by the way, had 3 losing fighters.
That means we all suck. We all suck, and he sucked less.
He had 3 losing fighters. 477 points. He had the right 3 winning fighters, first off, with Thimba Grimbo, Charles Radke, and Molly McCann, all of them getting 119, 122, 129. And then he had Maxim, Dober, and Dolidze, all losers there. And if you're in our Discord, I've learned something over the past couple of days. I don't think Pete likes the yearly standings.
No, I don't like these early standings at all. It's trash. It's great to see how everybody's doing in the week-to-week contest, and it is fun because you got tons of MMA minds within the same community. I would like to think that it's a sharp field in there. It really is, which is why I'm not having the best turnout week to week. Some weeks I do fine, and in other weeks I'm kind of middle of the pack. But yeah, if you guys haven't joined the Discord, please do it. Talk within the Discord. It's free to join. You can, get into the community contest, which is great. And it's money to be made too. Like you could just be sharper than the 30 people that are entering the contest, which has grown now, Jason. I mean, that's pretty cool. I remember we were doing it was like 10 people, 12 people. Now it's like close to 30 people every week. So, kudos to you for starting that contest, and thankful to keep it going.
Mentioned about our community we have over at Fight HQ. How about we gotta give some kudos to Coach over there, taking down first and third place in the big GPP last week, splitting first place there with give me that 1993, taking down over $62,000. And Coach, I don't know if you follow him on Twitter or not. He threw his 1099 out there, DraftKings. So he had a very good 2023.
Yeah. Well, damn, Coach. And Coach has been a longtime supporter, and greatly appreciate you tuning in each and every week. He's a GPP monster, that guy. He really is. I know he goes to the live finals all the time for various sports, and that's kind of like that's why we do this, and that's why we're all hoping to get to that point. And then we also had another listener, somebody who messaged me on Instagram, Alex Anderson, had the same exact lineup taken down the tournament, splitting with Coach as well. So Fight HQ dominated. And if you guys haven't yet and you want to throw up that Fight HQ logo, please do. Please do. Let everybody know it. Or maybe don't. And keep it a nice secret between us all. But, Coach and Alex both took down 62,000. So, I liked getting the message from Alex and, obviously seeing how Coach did. And it's why we do it, right? Like, it's how Jason and I are hoping it's one of us one of these days. And then each and every member within the community, like, that's the goal. Get that check mark next to you guys. So, but hell yeah, good, nice lineups.
Yeah, that was awesome. Unfortunately, some of my core plays just did not work out for me last week. Of course, if you want to show your support for the channel, of course, hit that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up on the video. It really does help us out. And if you can leave a comment after the fact, that truly does help out the algorithm. And if you want to show some more support for us, Stochastic and all their tools they have, they've got some offers for our listeners as well. You can check out that there in the show notes as well. But Pete, as we talk about game theory coming up here for this week, and, I was, putting together my spreadsheet this morning, and there was a couple of fights that kind of really stuck out to me, and there's 2 fights on the main card. I mean, obviously I know everyone's going to be looking at the main event. Joe Pyfer, we're going to get into Joe here in a little bit, but to me, I think the 2 fights that really stick out to me on the main card are the Vieira, Petrosyan, and Johnson Flowers fight. I think both of these fights are going to be 2 fights that I prioritize when I'm making my groups tomorrow.
Yeah, you're a smart man, and I completely agree with you. I think that they're volatile matchups we have to be on the right side of, optimal matchups. Could the Vieira and Petrosyan fight produce 80-something points? Sure, but if no other underdogs come through, that's where an 80-point Rodolfo Vieira or 80-point Armen Petrosyan comes through, just as a slight underdog in a matchup like that to help you take down the GPP. So. I'm right there with you. On a week where I'm not in love with a ton of underdogs, it's slim pickings. I'm going to take a calculated shot at a few, and then mix and match with some others. But I'm excited for some of these top end options. Like Carlos Prates is like a guy I'm super high on, as I told you last week, and I'm excited to see him unfold. And poor Trevin Giles, man. You look at who he's been fighting within the UFC. His management has not done him any favors.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you one of the things when I was looking at the betting odds, I was like, man, do I want to get behind a 2.5 to 1 favorite in Devin Clark taking on Marcin Prachnio? And talking, the 2 fights I mentioned, the Johnson Flowers and Vieira Petrosyan fight, they're both salary savers. Whether you're playing on DraftKings or if you're playing on FanDuel, you got some salary savings there. And Johnson Flowers I kind of look at some of the things I've color coded already on my spreadsheet. You're looking at the ownership of that one, that kind of sticks out to me. Even though, man, Zach Pauga is a guy that I hate to trust, the ownership on that one is something that I'm looking at there as well. And appreciate the super chat there from Liker. Really appreciate that, man. He says, go get some lunch on me, fellas. It was the best way I could say thanks for helping me win that tournament. I couldn't have got first without you guys. Congratulations, man. That's awesome, and truly do appreciate that super chat over there as well. As so hopefully I need to take down a tournament this week. I'm just saying, but spent a lot of money the past couple weeks.
I'm telling you right now, I feel real confident, and I'm not a cocky guy. I think I might be taking down this whole fucking thing. I really do. I think I might be. And probably because I'm running on low sleep. So take that for what it's worth. And working late all week, I don't know. I do feel sharp, though, because I've been at work just constantly thinking about this card. Hopefully not overthinking it, but I'm ready to rock and roll.
Dude, I'll tell you what. I got back in the gym this week. I'll tell you.
I saw that. Good job.
Dude, my energy level is insane right now.
Good.
No, I'm not having that afternoon crash like I was having, man. Yeah. Even though I slept in a little, I didn't get to the gym when I wanted to this morning. Got there a little bit later. The only thing is, like, the gym I go to, like, you gotta. There's sweet spots. You go between like 5 and 6:30, packed as shit.
Yeah.
Go after 7 o'clock at night, packed as shit.
Yeah.
The rest of the day, not too bad.
Yeah, and happy to see you get back on the horse and start attacking that stuff again. So hell yeah.
Oh yeah. It's got some motivation going on right now. Let's just say that. Got some motivation going on right now. But let's get right into these fights. Of course, the main event, it is classic UFC matchmaking here. We've seen this type of matchup for a long time. It is the vet, the guy that's been around, top of the division, going through a little bit of a slide, and now we're going to put him up against the up-and-coming prospect, the guy's rising, the guy that wants a big payday, and the UFC saying, okay, you want that big payday? Well, you're going to have to fight the elite of this division. Of course, we got Jack Hermansson taking on Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer, a minus 260 betting fair, plus 210 for Jack Hermansson. Hermansson is $7,200 on DK, $13 on FanDuel, which that salary really stuck out to me when I saw that on FanDuel. Joe Pyfer, $9,000 on DK, $23 on FanDuel, Pete.
Yeah, so I like Joe Pyfer, right? Like I do like Joe Pyfer. This is a step up of competition, and this is a nice test to see if you're legitimate or not. So this is a fraud test. Do I think it's too big of a step up of competition? Yes and no. I mean, Jack Hermansson has fought a crazy, crazy resume of UFC top level competition, whereas Joe Pyfer hasn't. In addition to that, like you take the 5 round experience that Jack Hermansson has within his toolbox, his dangerous submission skills, his volume based striking style to like stay on the outside. But I got to tell you, from like a trustworthy standpoint, I'm not too confident in Jack Hermansson from like a an optics situation. I kind of think he's going to be gun shy against the heavy hitter in Joe Pyfer. I mean, I'm not convinced that Jack Hermansson's going to be the better wrestler in this situation. But Joe Pyfer has been competing in grappling competitions in addition to his MMA fights. So, I like the activity. I started to do the same thing within my own game, and it's helped me a lot. Uh, Jack Hermansson's takedowns sometimes he's not efficient with his takedowns. We saw him go 0 of 6 against Curtis, 0 of 8 against Sean Strickland, 2 of 7 against Marvin Vettori. But listen to those 3 fighters I just mentioned. Like, that's all top tier competition. But it's almost like his fight IQ and the optics, I think, could work against him here. I give Joe Pyfer 3 legitimate rounds to get this done. And then clearly it starts tilting in the Jack Hermansson favor, and possibly it's 2.5, which is why, I don't hate the underdog shot in Jack Hermansson at all. I mean, look what he's done against some of the best fighters. Joe Pyfer is only 3-0 in the UFC. Alan Amedovski, Gerald Mearshart, and Abdul Razak Al Hassan. The thing that I'm getting behind is the gym. I'm really getting behind the gym down in Philly. Marquez BJJ, they used to, it was like Renzo Gracie, Philly, and then now it's Marquez BJJ for most of the guys, and it's just a really tough room. You look at that room and who's competing in it day in and day out, and you guys know that I love backing fighters that are actually training in MMA gloves. It sounds like the craziest statement ever, but you're actually starting to see, a lot of camps introduce that into what they're doing, is the puffy MMA gloves with the headgear, and basically making it a real fight every single session. Mm-hmm. And with all that being said, I think Joe Pyfer hits too damn hard. Do I love his volume? No, I don't love his volume. I think that, you could look and see and critique his performances from time to time and say, it looks like he's somewhat of a gasser. And I could see that. But I really do think that the power he possesses, the offensive wrestling, and just the momentum within his career. I'm going to be picking Joe Pyfer here at 9,000. I don't hate the underdog shot at Jack Hermansson. I'm probably going to be lighter on the ownership than what I'm seeing for Joe Pyfer. But I do think that he's a solid option. It's just, I think his volume could actually come to bite him here as far as breaking into the optimal lineup, because there are some other 9,000 options that I think are a little bit more likely to end within 1 or 2 rounds with higher volume. So, it's Joe Pyfer for me. What about you?
So you bring up a lot of great points. I mean, one of my things about Joe Pyfer is, okay, it's, even though Jack Hermansson's on a little bit of a slide, we're talking about he's fighting the elite of this division. He's fighting the top 5, top 8 type guys in this division. My concern is this a too big of a step up in competition for Joe Pyfer? I will say this. Do I have concerns about Jack Hermansson being able to take the shot from Joe Pyfer? Yes. I also do wonder, and we just don't know, what does a round 3, round 4, round 5 Joe Pyfer look like? That's kind of where I have a little bit of a concern, is if Jack Hermansson can stretch us into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, is that ultimately his path? And also, I like the point that you brought up about, you don't really love the volume of Joe Pyfer. And as I think about GPP contest, depending on the type of contest you're entering, I mean, let's just say you're entering in that top, the $18 GPP contest. And if you're not putting a ton of entries in it, like, I would really just reduce my ownership on Joe Pyfer as a way to get different, because what we're seeing right now in ownership, it's a massive number. And that was kind of one of my things of like, as you talk about game theory, one of my game theories is like, whether let's just say you're a single entry or a 5 entry or maybe a 10 entry type player. Like I would go very underweight on Joe Pyfer and trying to get a little bit different.
I'm with you. I'm with you. And the builds that I have already, I like to do a portion of my builds just being hand built. Like, and I try to get as different as possible. And then I'll use the crunching system to help me as well. Start to get the final 17 lineups or whatever. I'm with you. I'm slightly underweight to the Joe Pyfer ownership. Do I think he scores great? Yeah. But anything in the 90s, in my opinion, could be a possible disappointment when you got some other high-priced options that could get well over 100-plus points. So, yeah, I just need 600 points. And I think there's plenty of ways to get 600 points this week.
I will say, looking at the betting side, I do like the plus 100 money line I'm seeing there on Joe Pyfer wins by KO, TKO. I think that's one. I mean, even seeing as much as plus 125, plus 130 over there. And that would be my concern with Jack Hermansson is more about the chin aspect of whether maybe he's going to be able to take that shot from Joe Pyfer. But this is a litmus test for Joe Pyfer. Is he potentially a top 10 guy in this division? Next up, the co-main event is a featherweight matchup. Dan Ige taking on Andre Fili. Andre Fili is a plus 140 betting underdog, minus 170 for Dan Ige. Ige 8,600 on DK, $18 on FanDuel, and for Fili 7,600 on DK and $12 on FanDuel.
Yeah, limited interest in this fight from a DFS aspect, to be honest. I think it's a hell of a matchup. I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait to enjoy the fight because I like both Dan Ige and Andre Fili. But like I'm just not convinced that it's going to produce the best DFS score. If somebody knocks somebody out, then of course I'm wrong. I just think that it's going to be a tit for tat, back and forth kickboxing match with somebody throwing slightly more volume and maybe a little bit more effectiveness, and that's probably going to be Dan Ige. I really don't hate the Andre Fili underdog shot to win a decision. The finish only market, I think, clearly favors Dan Ige, whereas Andre Fili is, he's susceptible on the feet to getting rocked and dropped and finished. But I'm kind of hoping and rooting for him because I like him a lot. Like I like what he's done within his career. We've watched him from the beginning to now. I want to see his success. Not saying I have anything against Dan Ige. It's just like I'm more of an Andre Fili guy. So if I was doing 150 max, of course I'm going to get to a co-main event underdog who could possibly win a decision. But do I view this fight as the winner wins more than 80-plus points? Not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. So I'm going to be still picking Dan Ige to win a competitive fight. But it's kind of hard for me to see like Dan Ige, going 3 rounds. Dan Ige's won rounds against some great competition. He's won rounds against Calvin Kattar, Josh Emmett, Nate Landwehr, Bryce Mitchell even. So it's like when I look at Andre Fili, sometimes in a competitive fight, he allows his opponents to just edge him out a little bit. And that's why I'm siding with Dan Ige here. He kind of has the little more thud behind the shots. And at 8,600, I would pivot away from both. But if anybody, I'm going to be getting more exposure to Andre Fili.
I'll give you my first sprinkle of the day in terms of betting.
What is it?
Dan Ige wins by TKO KO, which you can get anywhere from plus 250 all the way to 3-1.
I'm not hating on your pick. I feel like a lot of people are on that, and it's like I'm just not seeing that. I mean,
look, I think the odds are likely it does go to decision, but from a betting perspective of maybe looking to throw a little sprinkle on something that's got some nice plus money on it, that's one that sticks out there to me. Look, in terms of GPPs, I'm kind of like you. I'm not really in love with this fight in terms of GPP just because of looking at what is that upside. Obviously, I think if there's a stoppage in this fight, the stoppage is from Dan Ige. But I think if we're talking about a 15-minute fight that might primarily just play out on the feet, that's why on Prize Picks, like it's not something that I'm in love with this week. But the significant strike total for Dan Ige is 65.5. if I was going to play it, I would go more than 65.5 than going less than.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. That's kind of how I'm, forecasting the fight to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones where, obviously you're not getting a ton of ownership on either side of it, and I think that's very understandable. But, to me, I think the most likely scenario that is going to go to decision, I do like Dan Ige to get a decision win here, but we'll see what happens there. Next up, we got a matchup. We got Ihor Potieria taking on Robert Bryczek. Bryczek is a minus 160 betting favorite, plus 135 for Potieria. Potieria is 7,400 on DK, $14 on FanDuel, and for Bryczek, he is 8,800 on DK and $17 on FanDuel. One note I'll mention here about Bryczek, when I was looking at his resume, the thing that stuck out to me the most, we're talking about a fighter from Poland who never fought in KSW.
Yeah, exactly. International talent tends to, make waves within their area, and then across their big promotions internationally, that's when you start seeing it. But, this guy Bryczek, I'm just not sure that he is a prospect by any means. He obviously is an aged prospect. Getting an opportunity here against Ihor Potieria, who is a guy for the most part, we've faded him at times because of his volatility, but he's also surprised us at times, right? Like on the Contender Series, I'm pretty sure I even bet against him there because if you look at his strength of schedule, it's a deeply padded record, and it's against soft competition. At the end of the day, right, like if you're going out there and you're dispatching your opponents the way you should be dispatching them, I tend to value that a little bit more than the strength of schedule sometimes. It's great to be battle-tested, but sometimes, your best fights are left outside the UFC for little pay. And it's a boxing type of mindset of building people to get them confidence and get them experience. But I think there needs to be a balance. It can't just be one way or the other, or else you're never going to make it into the UFC. Ihor inside the UFC got starched against Nikolai, picked up a nice victory over Shogun Hua, got dropped with a beautiful counter left hook against Carlos Olberg, and then surprised against Rodolfo Bolaji, where he was putting it on him, man. Like even several referees would have stopped that fight. It got really, really ugly for Rodolfo Bolaji, and Bolaji was on his back just eating hammer fists for days. Ultimately, what happened was Bolaji's ground game became too much. He took down Ihor Potieria and then started to literally just blast him with volume punches en route to a finish. It was some of the wildest 2 rounds you'll ever see. Now we have Ihor taking a fight on short notice against an unproven Polish prospect, supposedly prospect, in Bryczek here. Down a weight class, too, down at middleweight, which is completely opposite of what Ihor did within his entire UFC tenure, light heavyweights for all 4 of his fights. Ihor is a guy that I've kind of did a little bit of a deep dive on. He has cross-trained with Sean Strickland, which is great to see, sparring a lot over there, doing a ton of PI work in the lead up to this fight. So that's why he took this fight, because he's in good shape, and the PI is probably the place that recommended he would have success by dropping down a weight class. He's just way too small for light heavyweight. I didn't see how he looked on the scale, Jason, as I just woke up not too long ago from working third shift, but I am actually going to be siding with Ihor Potieria here. I think that as a southpaw, he can catch the chin of Bryczek, who is pretty elementary with his striking, has power, muscle-bound guy. I think that Potieria can, find the mark somehow, or if he doesn't get him out of there, I think that his cardio is better than Bryczek, who hasn't really been tested outside of a couple minutes in his past several fights. So, I'm going to be siding with Ihor Potieria here, 7,400. I feel like it's going to be a very popular underdog. And if you're on the opposite side of it, you might be looking at one of the best leverage plays, lost in the shuffle within the 8K range in Bryczek. But I'm going to be picking Ihor Potieria here at 7,400 to hopefully be one of the few underdogs to come through for us on this ugly underdog card.
I would say it's one of those things with Ihor. It's tough for me to trust him, but to go on with your point there, what the PI does is they do all these tests on fighters, and they tell them certain things about their bodies. And I remember this was years ago, the first time Eric Anders went there and got tested, and Eric always had that mindset of you got to train three times a day, coming from that football mentality, and then the PI says, hey, you're actually hurting your body by doing that. And they say you only need to do 2 times a day. And then also they do tell you kind of like, if you're contemplating going down a weight class, they give you that sense of can you make that weight or not. To me, it's one of these things with a guy coming into the UFC. He's had a canceled matchup. I want to see him do it first before I'm willing to pay that price tag. So to me, I think that it's kind of that situation of take the underdog or pass on the fight, and just kind of see the way things develop there. Next up, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Like, what I said last week about being very selective with getting behind which debuting fighters we're going to back in their UFC debut, especially at a large number. You saw what happened with Jamal Pogues against Thomas Peterson, and Thomas Peterson, unproven prospect coming in there. I leaned into the ugly, volatile side of Pogues, and it worked out. So we just got to pick our shots, and I think this is where we have to pick Ihor Potieria to pull it off for us.
I was getting so frustrated watching that fight last week.
Oh, yeah, bro.
I was sitting there, and the coaches are telling him, don't let your feet get behind that black line. And oh, God, it was so frustrating to watch. Between that and Mark Smith in the co-main event, as literally Moncano's got the fight to the ground for like 15 seconds. You got to work. I'm like, no, it is not the referee's job to get you off your back.
I agree.
I'm sorry. I was sitting on the couch watching that fight. I was getting angry. Yes, I had backed Moncano a lot, but I'm sitting there going, it's not the referee's job to bail Drew Dober out being caught in a dominating position. Like that's become like one of my pet peeves of referees.
Yeah, because they're trying to become company guys, and they want to be viewed as the ref that's going to, be a part of exciting matchups. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this ref stood them up when they were doing nothing, because the casuals don't like the ground game. The hardcores, we do. You know what I mean? Like, we do. We appreciate it. And this comes from a striker.
Look, there's certain types of ground games I like, certain types of ground games I don't like. You think of it back in the day, Jared Rochal, he was just a wet blanket. Exactly. If I see someone who's trying to advance positions, and I thought Drew Dober was doing a very good job of being defensive, but I'm just like no, ref, it's not your job to bail Drew Dober out. It's just
I'm with you. Imagine thinking like Charles Oliveira's ground game's boring. Like, imagine thinking like that. Like, you ever watch him roll and watch his submission reel? It's like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And, it's like I agree with you though. Like, there's certain moments, but not in advantageous positions.
And let's be honest about it. If Imavov and Dolidze is not the main event, I think that fight's finished and is stopped in the first round.
I agree.
Yeah, Dolidze is one tough son of a bitch. There is no doubt about it, man. That dude can take a pounding and keep on coming. Let's move over to our next matchup, middleweight matchup here. It's really middleweight division, kind of is a division the UFC is really focusing on here the past couple of weeks. We got Brad Tavares taking on Gregory Rodrigues. Gregory Rodrigues is a -250 betting favorite. Brad Tavares +205. Rodrigues 9,100 DK, $20 on FanDuel, and for Tavares 7,100 DK and $11 on FanDuel. Pete.
I was trying to talk myself into a Brad Tavares underdog call, and I just can't do it. I can't do it in 2024. But I feel like the public needs to pump their brakes a little bit on the expectations for Gregory Rodrigues. Gregory Rodrigues is very good. His jiu-jitsu is second to none. His kickboxing in general is just he's very talented in all areas. He's very well-rounded. He's very patient, though. And in interviews, he's talked about his patience and not having to rush things. And rushing things in the past has led to negative results. I totally agree. For as patient as he is, the guy's been on a complete spree of just like getting finishes. First round victory over Dennis Talulin. Second round victory over Chidi Njokuani. First round over Julian Marquez. Jung Young Park, second round TKO, and his debut fight was a 15-minute decision over Dusko Todorovic. So as patient as he is, he's still finding the mark and finding the finish. And 119, 141, 108, and 98 are his fantasy point totals. So if you're a box score watching, as I'm sure many people are, they're going to be rostering Gregory Rodrigues a lot. I just worry about Brad Tavares sucking Gregory Rodrigues into a typical Brad Tavares fight. One that tends to go long, one that is a back and forth fight, one where they both have slight moments of hurting each other and they both have question marks about their chin, durability concerns. Who's the better fighter in 2024? It's Gregory Rodrigues, in my opinion. Gregory Rodrigues, if he gets Brad Tavares to the mat, can TKO him, could possibly submit him. But the issue is Brad Tavares, for the most part, has phenomenal takedown defense. I just think it's going to be a battle-tested decision, truthfully. Or if there is a finish, it comes late, not early. So I'm okay with pivoting away from both of these guys. Do I like Gregory to win the fight? Yes, I do. I just think, like, you know, Brad's fought a ton of competition and also comes from a very strong gym. I think he'll be competitive early, and then we'll see Gregory Rodrigues start to, edge him out over 15 minutes, which might be a hot take. Everybody's expecting Gregory to knock out Brad Tavares. I'm just not a part of that population. The reason I can't get behind Brad Tavares is I completely thought that he would finish Chris Weidman. For a guy that has been known to just go the distance, it seemed like all the stars aligned for him to get a victory and finish Chris Weidman in that situation by continuing to chop at those legs. And especially when Weidman was a sitting duck, it was almost like Brad Tavares is just too good of a dude and didn't want to do it. But the killer instinct is just non-existent. So I'm going to be picking Gregory Rodrigues to win a 15-minute decision or a late stoppage. 9,100 is a fine price tag, but I laid out the concerns of why I'm not going to back him as heavily as some other people. But he should win the fight.
One of my favorite plays on Prize Picks this week is actually the over 12.5 fight time minutes on Gregory Rodrigues, just because I think that it's a high probability that he is going to, this fight's going to go the distance. And by the way, Woody just put it in the chat that Ihor Potieria missed weight and looks horrible. So I'll have to go back and watch that after we get done with the show here. But, like, to me, I think this thing goes 15 minutes. I mean, we have seen Brad Tavares get knocked out recently in some of his losses, but I think this thing likely goes 15 minutes. Look, and just looking at ownership projections on Gregory Rodrigues, I'd be looking to get to some of the other 9K options than get to him here. But obviously, you kind of want to monitor. Maybe if those ownership projections go down a little bit on Gregory Rodrigues, maybe you want to get there. But I would say over on Prize Picks, this is actually the first fight that we've talked about that I do like a prop over Prize Picks, and that's 12.5 fight time minutes. Go the under there. And by the way, if you're playing on Prize Picks, they got essentially a free square there on Patrick Mahomes if you want to line up some cards there. And also, hey, Pete, you can play Power Slap tonight.
No thanks. No thanks.
We're actually showing it at the bar.
Oh my God, Jason!
They're giving it to commercial establishments for free. It's a part of your DirecTV package.
Oh my God!
By the way, Woody says Ihor weighed at 187.5, so 2 pounds over.
Half?
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and look at it, but I thank you, Woody, for putting that in the chat. That changes things, right? It does change things, but does it? If he killed himself to make the weight, that changes a lot of things. If he just said, screw it, and I'm pulling the plug on this attempt, I took the fight on short notice, the company should be happy regardless. They know that I'm going to try to make the weight. It could just be a strategic, I don't want to kill myself type of thing. This is possibly also a failed experiment. Down to 185 pounds. I mean, the gap from 205 to 185 is massive. So I'm not going to fault him. Did I think it was intelligent to take a fight on short notice down a weight class, especially when there's a 20-pound gap? No, I didn't. But, like, from a skill standpoint, if we take the weight miss aside, that's why I'm picking Ihor Potieria. If I'm not getting behind Ihor Potieria, I might have to introduce some weird and wild things for my lineups this weekend.
Yeah, MMA Mania's got a short little video up there, and you just look at Pretoria's face. He knew he wasn't on weight.
Really?
Yeah, just a blank that blank stare. We've seen that stare. We've seen that blank stare from fighters. But yeah, it's you're not going to go there. But yeah, I will say this: I don't mind getting to Brad Tavares in cash games. If you're a cash games player, may not be someone I would not mind getting to. Next up, we got another matchup here. We got another OG of the UFC, a guy that one of the most weirdest resumes in UFC history, and that's Michael Johnson. Yep. A guy who knocked out Dustin Poirier, but is essentially a 500 fighter in the UFC as he takes on Darrius Flowers, who, by the way, is the only fighter to not weigh in at this time. Michael Johnson, a minus 140 betting favorite, plus 120 for Darrius Flowers. Johnson, $8,300 on DK, $16 on FanDuel. Flowers, $7,900 on DK, $15 on FanDuel. And Michael Johnson shared a story this week where he said he had to block Darrius Flowers on social media.
I saw that. Here comes my stand of the week, and do with it whichever you may, but I'm going to be backing Michael Johnson pretty heavily here. Granted, there are tons of concerns, right? The chin, is it even there? Can it hold up to anything? You know, I do tend to say that I'm a biased Michael Johnson believer, but if you wanted to be a profitable MMA bettor, you probably should just be betting against him for the past 5-10 years. He's won some fights against some top tier competition, and he's, made boneheaded decisions from time to time and lost also. But if you look at his resume, the one thing you can't say is that he avoided tough fights. This guy's fought everybody. Old veterans, new guys, guys on the come up, prospects. I mean, it's pretty scary when you go throughout his resume. And do I think that on any given night he could give the champion of the world problems? Absolutely. But there is tons of volatility, and beware, because if it's gone too far, then a guy like Darrius Flowers can clearly win this fight. Do I think Flowers is UFC level? No, I don't. I really don't. I don't see him as UFC level. He took a short notice fight against Jake Matthews up at welterweight. His hands look good when he throws them. I do think that he's just not well-rounded. He attempted a takedown and oddly enough got it against Jake Matthews, but then was submitted within 2 rounds. Here's my thing, right, about Darrius Flowers is tons of boxing experience, very little success. Tons of striking experience. I think his ground game is super, super green, like super, super green. And a little interesting nugget and a feeling I've had all week. I think everybody in the world is expecting Michael Johnson to welcome a striking match. Okay, and hear me out. Usually Michael Johnson struggles against guys that have the ability to take him down. Anybody that tends to go to the takedown well over and over and over tends to break Michael Johnson over time. But early on within Michael Johnson's career, when we're talking a long time ago, okay, back in 2010 when he was competing on The Ultimate Fighter, he was the guy taking people down. He was the guy taking people to Takedown City. He's the guy that ragdolled Alex Caceres and numerous people on The Ultimate Fighter. I actually think from a coaching perspective, if I had a fighter like Michael Johnson who has so many durability concerns, I would say, listen, Mike, I don't want to see you keep getting hurt over and over again. What I need you to do is I need you to invest in the wrestling game here. Greg Jones, one of the best wrestling mentors in the game, a part of Killcliff FC, I really think sat him down and talked to him. Now, I could be wrong, and he could just go out there and kickbox Darrius Flowers and knock him out or get knocked out. But I almost feel like he has an ace up his sleeve, and he's going to lace up those wrestling shoes against Darrius Flowers. And also, in addition to that, the reason I'm thinking so is I see he's been working with Patchy Mix secretly. Working with Patchy Mix a lot, who's a very good friend of Michael Johnson. Why the hell would you be working with Patchy Mix if you are not working on your ground game? I don't care that he's a 135-pounder. Patchy Mix is huge. He could compete at 145 or 155. I'm telling you, it's just a feeling, but I cannot get behind Darrius Flowers. If I lose my money because of it, I lose my money because of it. But in 2024, I'm still picking the skill set, and Michael Johnson has the well-rounded skill set to win this fight however he wants.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about that boxing resume of Darrius Flowers. Yeah, not much success.
Right.
1 win, 12 fights.
There's a lot of people in MMA that do that.
Yeah.
And they get finished.
Yeah. Out of those 10 losses, 7 were via TKO/KO. Yeah. This is one of those ones. I do like Michael Johnson in this one. I primarily think that, and I like what you're saying there based on who he's working with, but I think Michael Johnson's going to get a knockout here. That's just my thought. We'll see what happens with Darius Flowers in terms of the scale. By the way, Samuel, appreciate your super chat as well. As always, appreciate those super chats that do come in. Next up, we got our opening matchup of the main card. We got Rodolfo Vieira taking on Armen Petrosyan. Rodolfo is a -120 betting favorite, +100 for Petrosyan, A200 for Vieira, $16 on FanDuel, and Petrosyan's $8,015 on FanDuel. Pete?
Yeah, so this classic grappler versus striker matchup, I mean, what are you going to lean into? Rodolfo Vieira, whose striking is subpar, or Armen Petrosyan, whose takedown defense is below subpar. But I will say that Armen Petrosyan does a good job at working back to his feet. The issue is if he turns and gives his back to Rodolfo Vieira, that could be all she wrote. Just one time. That's all you need to do is give your back to Rodolfo Vieira once, and it's over. We did see Armen Petrosyan give up his back in several of his UFC fights, Gregory Rodrigues, Kyle Bahalio. But when I see Gregory Rodrigues have the back on Armen Petrosyan and Kyle Bahalio have the same exact position, and they're unable to finish Petrosyan from there, it gives me a little confidence. A little confidence that maybe Rodolfo just can't. Even though I do think that there are levels for BJJ, Gregory Rodrigues and Kyle Bahalio are comparable to Rodolfo Vieira. The back takes that Rodolfo has are fantastic, but at one point he was viewed as a gasser. In addition to that, I have worries and concerns about his durability. I mean, when you get dropped and outstruck by Cody Brundage early, and just your inefficient takedown attempts as well. 1 of 7 against Cody Brundage, 0 of 20 against Chris Curtis, which is ballooning that terrible output accuracy. 4 of 10 against Anthony Hernandez. If you can sprawl and brawl or make him work, you can break him. Petrosyan does well at throwing knees up the middle, getting the tie plum. If he gets taken down, I just hope he doesn't get his back taken. From the outside, Petrosyan should pick Rodolfo Vieira apart. You can't really go wrong in this matchup when it comes to building your lineups, but I'm going to actually side with the striker here. Training out of American Top Team, split camp as he's been doing within his whole entire UFC career. I just think the preparation is going to be there for him, and similar matchups against guys that are much more well-rounded than Rodolfo Vieira, but comparable jiu-jitsu. I think that Armen might actually pick up his first TKO win, to be honest, inside the UFC. He's been a decision machine. 4 fights that gone the distance. Rodolfo, we've seen him break. That was mainly against Anthony Hernandez. But in the Cody Brundage fight, it was looking awfully similar there. So I'll be going with Petrosyan to hopefully work his way back up and punish Rodolfo en route to either a late stoppage or dominant decision win.
Yeah, I mean, what concerns you is just what you outlined. The fact of, does Rodolfo get the fight to the ground? I do like the under 2.5 takedowns prop on Prize Picks for Rodolfo Vieira. And my general thought process on that is if he gets it down once, I don't think he gets it back up. That's just my general thought. And like you, if he gets it back. But I do like it. To me, like it's a classic MMA matchup. Striker versus grappler. If you tell me this thing plays out on the feet, yeah, I love Armen Petrosyan. I think, yeah, he'll pick him apart, but it's just, can he, we've seen issues with being able to stop the takedowns. And I mean, Pete, how many times have we talked about on this show about, jiu-jitsu guys are not exactly, the greatest takedown artists, but once they get you down there, you're in their world. And, but you do kind of wonder if Petrosyan can keep this fight on the feet. And, maybe if you're looking for a sprinkle, maybe you look at either Petrosyan wins by decision or Petrosyan wins via TKO in round 3.
I agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, jiu-jitsu skill sets are not all the same, and Kyle Bahalio more of a control-oriented guy, whereas Rodolfo Vieira is an opportunistic grappler and, very good at finding the finish. So I don't disagree to Mr. Grapefruit in the chat. But I actually do think that Gregory Rodrigues is just as dangerous as Rodolfo Vieira. Just as dangerous, if not more. So, I'll be siding with Petrosyan here to pick up a victory.
Next up, we got Trevin Giles taking on Carlos Prates. Prates minus 260 betting fair, plus 210 for Giles. Giles 7,000 on DK, $9 on FanDuel. For Carlos, he's 9,200 on DK, and $21 on FanDuel, Pete.
Yeah, so this is going to be a pretty simple breakdown. Trevin Giles has been given a very, very, very tough UFC career. I mean, Gabriel Bonfim, Michael Morales, Dricus du Plessis, Roman Dolidze, Bavon Lewis at a time. Remember when Bavon Lewis was supposed to be? The Cosi brother, Louis Cosi. Like, this guy's fought some top-tier competition, so I don't know if it's like trying to be the guy to spoil all these prospects or if it's just like mismanagement. What I'll tell you is Carlos Prates, he's coming off the Contender Series where Dana White compared him to Anderson Silva-esque. I actually don't disagree with it. Like, his striking's gross. He's a big southpaw for the division. Absolutely massive for welterweight. He will switch stances and throw kicks and combinations from all directions. Throws a beautiful knee to the liver side. He's just so long and dangerous and tricky. And he comes out of the Fighting Nerds, which is a camp I'm extremely high on. And I've been. And it's like, don't fade them. Ride these hot camps while you can. Trevin Giles could possibly, spoil the debut if the nerves get to Prates, but we're talking about a guy who's had a tremendous amount of success outside the UFC. In addition to having success, he's had crazy finish rates. Like, this guy is a killer. 9,200. I think one way or another he hurts Trevin Giles en route to a finish, most likely via KO, TKO. 9,200. I'm gonna be back in Carlos Prates. If you want to prove me right type of strategy, then back Trevin Giles. But I just can't do it here. I'm going to be going with Prates. I think he's legit.
I will say this. If you want to, I was thinking about this earlier. If I was going to get away from the ownership of Joe Pyfer, I might just spend $200 up and go to Carlos.
That's what I'm doing. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, and that's just playing that ownership game when you talk about these big GPP contests. Next up, we got Oki taking on Timmy. Timmy is a plus 140 betting underdog. Oki minus 170. Oki 9,500 on DK, $19 on FanDuel. For Timmy, he's 7,500 on DK and $11 on FanDuel. Pete.
Yeah, we got Timothy Cumaba against Bolaji Oki, and Bolaji Oki was supposed to be going up against a tough out. But like Damir Hadzovic is a guy who never really materialized. But the name Hadzovic, we know who he is. We don't really know who Timothy Cumaba is, but Timothy Cumaba is stepping up on short notice. Guy coming off of some regional success. We've seen him fight in the Contender Series. I think he's pretty good, actually. I do think that Timothy Cumaba is good. Do I like him in this matchup? No. Short notice. Go in there. Help the company out when the company needs you. Go in there and compete. If you don't get finished, I think the UFC is going to consider this a win. Like, this guy stepped up on short notice, and he made a competitive striking match against Bolaji Oki. We've seen Timothy Cumaba get hurt in the past. We've also seen him, resort to wrestling. But these guys, when they throw combinations, they dig to the body, which is something I love. I love body work. And Bolaji Oki is excellent at doing so. I actually think that the price tag for Bolaji Oki might be just a little overblown. I understand Timothy Cumba's coming in on short notice, but I think Cumba's pretty talented and probably better than Damir. So it's like I think that we're going to see a late finish or a dominant decision for Bolaji Oki, but there's going to be some competitive moments. 9,500 Bolaji Oki. I don't hate the spend up at all. If his opponent was bad, I think that he would be an absolute free square and a smash. I think from a win standpoint, he's still in a free square situation. But as far as DFS score, if it tends to go long, then you might have some other fighters that kind of outproduce him around him. So Bolaji Oki's going to get this fight, and he's going to win it. But I think that Timothy Cumaba could make things a little tricky and make Bolaji really dig deep.
Yeah, I was actually looking into Timmy a little earlier. Decent amount of fights are on YouTube if you want to check those out. Next up, we got a female matchup. Loma Lookboonmee taking on Bruna Brasil. Brasil plus 230 betting underdog, minus 280 for Lookboonmee. Lookboonmee 9,400 on DK, $22 on FanDuel. And for Bruna, she's 6,800 on DK and $8 on FanDuel, Pete.
I really like Loma Lookboonmee. I really do. I think that she's very talented, comes from a very strong gym, rounding out her game, incorporating takedowns. Do I think her fight IQ is great? No, I don't. I really don't. But the fact that she was able to win against Denise Gomes is impressive. 4 or 5 takedowns, 7 minutes of control. We saw her, get reversed against Elise Reed, who has a questionable ground game. Even though she landed 2 of 3 takedowns, she did find the submission in round 2. So she's in a situation where she's got a really hefty price tag. And in women's MMA, sometimes we have fights that tend to be closer. And when you have a fighter like Bruna Brasil coming from a very talented gym and the fighting nerds, it's just going to pique my interest. That's all I'm saying. Like, I think Loma Lookboonmee could go out there and look absolutely dominant, and given her price tag, she should. But if you're a single entry type of player and you don't like how Ihor Potieria looked, then maybe you just kind of punt. And you just punt and hope that somebody in a loss scores well enough and allows you the proper spend up to get 4 or 5 confident plays. I don't think many people are going to be playing Bruna Brasil here at all. Like, at all. And I'll tell you something, Jason. In a 150 max, I think I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive on her just because she comes from a good gym. And we know she comes from a Brazilian team. If she lands on top in some type of situation, we saw Elise Reed look like she knew what she was doing against Loma Lookboonmee on top. And we know she doesn't know what she's doing. Bruna Brasil could make it a little bit more interesting, but I do think that Loma just on the feet is just better. She's not so kick-oriented, whereas Bruna Brasil just kicks only, has no hands whatsoever. Loma will dump her. She will throw hands into knees, into the tie plum, and Loma's the better fighter, 100%. But in a volatile division and in a week where we need an underdog, I'm just saying that Bruna Brasil probably will come in at single-digit ownership, and I'll probably get to like 10% just because. But it's Loma Lookboonmee to win a decision here.
Yeah, I will tell you, I was actually looking at that takedown prop for Lookboonmee at 2.5 over on Prize Picks, and we have seen her get 3 and 4 takedowns in matchups here, so that was kind of one that I was looking there in terms of from a DFS perspective. Lookboonmee is not someone I really want to get to at 9,400. I'd rather get through some other options, just because I like those options as a fantasy score upside. Next up, we have got Devin Clark taking on Marcin Prachnio. Devin Clark is a minus 245 betting favorite, plus 200 for Prachnio. Prachnio 7,300 on DK, $10 on FanDuel, and for Devin Clark, he's $8,900 on DK and $20 on FanDuel, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me that Marcin Prachnio has a win over Khalil Roundtree, I think I'd probably bet against you. But you're right. It's like, how? And that just goes to show that, like, Khalil Roundtree has gone through phases where he's completely untrustworthy and then gun shy at times. And then, now he's looking like an absolute machine. Marcin Prachnio, if you keep it on the feet, he can make anything competitive. He's been striking his entire life. His kicks are pretty tricky, especially for the division. Not known for leg dexterity. Light heavyweight division, he can pick up his legs in all sorts of ways. Chops low kicks, stabs you to the body, the midsection. You saw what happened when he hit Ike Villanueva to the body with a liver kick. The issue is he's not well-rounded. And we cashed a big round 3 ticket when he fought Vitor Petrosyan, and Vitor Petrosyan came through and submitted him in the 3rd round. And up until that, like, he could have finished him in rounds 1, 2, or 3. I think Vitor's submission skills are still improving. I think Devin Clark's submission skills are basically non-existent. Defensively, he gets submitted as well. But the difference is that Devin Clark will actually push a tremendous pace. And if Marcin's able to get back to his feet, we could see Devin Clark take him down over and over and over again. And it really pains me and hurts me to back one of these guys. But for the show, I got to pick somebody, right? And like Devin Clark at 8,900 as a massive favorite, you're probably better off just fading him in most spots. But I don't think this is the spot to do so. I mean, you look at who he's fought and who he's gone pretty long with inside the octagon. It makes me have a little bit more confidence. I mean, training at altitude, clear wrestling and grappling advantage here against Marcin Prachnio. can hit really hard and test the durability and knock out Marcin Prachnio as well. But I think what's going to happen is he's going to get like 5 to 8 plus takedowns here with a ton of top control en route to a dominant decision over Marcin Prachnio. If this stays on the feet, Marcin can absolutely win and crack and knock out the frail Devin Clark from time to time. I just don't see it happening. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but Devin Clark might be one of the guys slightly beneath 9,000 that I'll lean into a little bit more.
You know you don't feel good about yourself saying that.
I don't. I don't at all. But, I mean, that's just the landscape of the slate this week.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, and look at it over on Prize Picks, 2.5 takedowns for Devin Clark. So hearing what Pete had to say there makes me kind of think, yeah, maybe go in the over there in next one. Next up, we got Max Griffin taking on Jeremiah Wells. Max Griffin is a plus 135 betting underdog. Jeremiah Wells is minus 160. Griffin, 7,700 on DK, $14 on FanDuel. And for Wells, 8,500 on DK and $17 on FanDuel. I'll let Pete break it down, but I will let you know there is a Prize Picks prop I really do like on this fight.
Okay. I like the fight, and I like the fight to go 15 minutes, truthfully. I think Max Griffin's a very tough out. 7-8 inside the UFC, 4-1 for Jeremiah Wells. We've seen what Jeremiah Wells can do offensively. So, like, he can hit really hard, he can knock you out. In addition to that, he can chain together crazy takedowns, big slams, picks you up over his head. He did it to Matt Samuelsberger, 6 of 10 in the takedown department, 11 minutes of control time. Carlston Harris, 3 of 5 in the takedown department before leaving his neck out there and getting choked. Almost 9.5 minutes of control time. So, Jeremiah Wells was on his way to winning a decision in that fight. The issue is like, I kind of view this as a similar fight, but Max Griffin doesn't have submission skills to possibly threaten him. The only thing is a big right hand or a big counter shot. I think it's going to be tough. I think Max will probably win one round or almost win one round, and it'll be a dominant decision win for Jeremiah Wells. It's just a fight I'd rather get away from because I feel like it's going to have a ton of ownership. You got Wells in the mid-range, tons of takedown potential, but I think people might be overlooking Max Griffin a little bit. I love the fact Wells is part of Marquez BJJ, formerly a part of Renzo Gracie Fili, working with Daniel Gracie a lot, but that Marquez BJJ team is just phenomenal, and I've seen what Jeremiah Wells can do in the training room, the regional room, and also at the UFC level. So I'm still picking Jeremiah Wells to win a tough out decision. Don't hate the Max Griffin underdog to win a decision, though, but I do think it goes 15 minutes.
Yeah, and that is the prop that I am all about over on this one on Prize Picks. The over 11.5 fight time minutes on Jeremiah Wells is a core play for me over there. And, if Max Griffin's price tag was a little bit lower, I think he'd be kind of one of those guys I'd really be targeting in terms of, that where that floor potentially is with him. But yeah, it's the 11.5 fight time minutes is the one that really sticks out to me. Next up, we got Zach Pauga taking on Bogdan Gusov. Gusov is a plus 110 betting underdog, minus 130 for Zach Pauga. Pauga 8,400 DK, 16 on FanDuel, and then 7,815 for Bogdan. Pete.
Yeah, I mean, like Zach Pauga is a guy that I just don't think has ever turned out to what I've been hearing. Like I expected to win the Ultimate Fighter. Zach Pauga, ran through the competition on the Ultimate Fighter, but the competition was mediocre. I think that he has good hands when he lets them go. Tends to struggle with pulling the trigger. We did see him get knocked out against Muhammad Usman. Offensively, he can wrestle, but yet he's gone 0 of 6 against Jordan Wright, 1 of 5 against Modestas Bukauskas. I don't know, man. I think he's there to be hit. I think he's very good, but I think he's lacking some things within the division. He's lacking power within a power-riddled division. And Bogdan Gusov, if anything, has that. And I do think that, you saw what he could do in his debut. He's dangerous. He's very dangerous despite his lack of submission defense. Getting submitted by Volkan's interesting, but I think this guy can crack. I really think this guy can crack, and I think in an exchange, he lands a big right hand and he knocks out Zach Pauga. And at 7,800, it comes through as one of the few underdogs that I'm actually confidently backing. But Gusov did look a little bit like, I mean, to get submitted by Volkan Oezdemir, but also debuting against Volkan is very difficult. But I'll be picking the underdog here in Bogdan Guskov. I think just Pauga's there to be hit, and Guskov's going to hit him with something heavy.
Yeah, Pauga was the guy heading into the Ultimate Fighter. I had someone that I really value their opinion in this sport. It told me this, like, hey, man, this guy is a favorite, but he's not a heavyweight. He's a light heavyweight. And I think we kind of saw that when we got, towards the end of that season there. And just a guy that, like you said, I mean, just has not lived up to it. But if you're looking for a leverage play in terms of ownership, this is the fight to target.
I agree. And like Zach Pauga was talking to some media members that I was listening to and saying that, he's been itching to get back in there, and him sitting on the sidelines has been bothering him, and he's going to look the best he's ever looked, and he feels better than ever. So like typical things you hear everybody say, but he does train with some real top tier competition, cross training with Devin Clark for this camp. In addition to that, he's, worked with Curtis Blades a lot. So like Pauga's a guy that has done a lot of the correct things outside the cage. It's just inside the cage, I just haven't seen it.
Boy, you talk about a forgotten guy in the UFC heavyweight division, Curtis Blades.
I know, it's crazy.
I mean, he was supposed to, you're supposed to have that fight against Shelton Almeida back in November, had to pull out due to an injury. But yeah, he's kind of, as we're seeing this heavyweight division, and whatever is going to happen at the top of this division. It seems like Curtis Blades just is a guy that people have a little bit forgotten about there, because, also Curtis doesn't exactly have the most exciting fighting style, Next up, we've got Fernie Garcia taking on Hyder Emil. Emil is a minus 190 betting favorite, plus 160 for Garcia. Garcia is 7,500 on DK, $12 on FanDuel. And for Hyder, he's 8,700 on DK and 19 on FanDuel, Pete.
I think I'd be interested more in Fernie Garcia if this wasn't on short notice. Granted, it's up a weight class, but it's the camp that he's coming from, right? Like, working with Saif Saud is awesome, but accepting something up a weight class on super short notice is concerning. It's like desperation and kind of searching for an answer, and he hasn't found an answer inside the UFC. Lost 3 fights via decision: Journey Newson, Brady Heistand, and Rinya Nakamura. I mean, 2 of those fighters, Heistand and Nakamura, are dogs. Like, that's difficult matchups, and he had spots and moments in there where he looked good, attempts good submissions, attempts guillotines, uses a guillotine to reverse position a lot, stuffs some takedowns, can land a powerful strike when he throws, somewhat of gun shy. I'll say that Hyder Emil is a guy I'm not necessarily high on, but I am impressed with the way he pushes a pace and the way that he throws with reckless abandon and just kind of puts his foot on the gas pedal to go. And it breaks a lot of people. I mean, he stuffed, I don't know how many takedowns, 10 plus takedowns on the Contender Series, and forward pressure breaks a lot of people when you put them on their back foot. I don't know, man. I'm expecting Hyder Emil to still win this fight. I don't think that he's going to finish Fernie Garcia. Finishing Fernie Garcia, I think, would be, a feather in his cap. I just don't see it. If Rinya Nakamura didn't finish Fernie, I don't see how Hyder Emil is going to, personally. I kind of wanted to blindly get behind Fernie Garcia just from maybe, like, back in the day, he used to offensively wrestle, and then he'd use that wrestling to take the back of a lot of people, and he would work his way towards rear naked chokes. And watching Hyder Emil's regional tape, he gets his back taken in several fights and almost choked out in a couple. And we're talking about a guy in Fernie Garcia training at Fortis MMA with top-tier competition. Do I know if he's in shape right now? No, I don't. I also haven't seen the weigh-ins. I also don't know what his cardio is like. That's what I'm saying. Like, in a full camp, this would be different. But I'm still going to pick the guy Hyder Emil, who I'm just not the highest on because of his defensive deficiencies. But I think that he should do enough to win a decision here over Fernie Garcia.
Next up, we got our opening matchup of the night. Stadium Marcos taking on Arichi Lang. Arichi Lang is plus 220 betting underdog. Marcos minus 270. Marcos 9,300 DK, $21 on FanDuel. Arichi Lang 6,900 DK, $10 on FanDuel. Marcos didn't need 2 attempts to make weight. He has made weight at 136 pounds.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the line has kind of gotten overblown here, but I do like Daniel Marcos to edge out Arichi Lang or pick up a late stoppage. not in love with the killer instinct of Daniel Marcos, if I'm being honest. I mean, Davey Grant fight, that's a tough fight. Most people thought he lost. I did as well. But it's tough. The fact that he went 15 minutes with Davey Grant makes me, gives me confidence that he can go 15 minutes against a Richie Long. And he can defend some takedowns as he did against Simon Oliveira and, make you pay. I think that Richie Long's chin, got hurt big time against Ayman Zahabi. But that was a nice shot over the top that he just didn't see coming. And like Marcos can do the same thing, but he's more methodical and like sniper-like on the outside and takes his time, chops at the legs. Not really a crazy finisher or power puncher. So like Daniel Marcos, do I like him? Yeah, 9,300. I like two fighters more than him personally. I like Carlos Prates a lot more, and I like Bolaji Oki. Daniel Marcos is probably like third on my list within the maybe even fourth on my list because I might like Joe Pyfer more than Daniel Marcos. But if these guys somehow throw a ton of strikes, like we're talking like 300 strikes, sometimes volume wins en route to a crazy score. But Marcos should win this one pretty handily as long as he can keep it upright and not get taken down.
Let's get into our straight up five picks before we wrap this show up with some listener questions. Main event, I will go Joe Pyfer.
Joe Pyfer.
Give me Dan Ige.
Dan Ige.
I will go Bryczek.
I'm going to go Potieria, even though he looked supposedly bad.
Rodrigues. Johnson. I'll go Rodolfo.
Petrosyan.
Prates. Oki. Lookboonmee. Clark. Give me underdog number 1, Max Griffin.
Okay, I'm going Jeremiah Wells.
Don't feel great about this. Give me Zach Pauga.
All right, Guskov.
I'll go Hyder Emil.
Hyder.
And then I will go Daniel Marcos.
Daniel Marcos for me as well, man.
Let me get some questions that we got in here from our Discord channel before we start to wrap things up here. First off, we got favorite core plays.
I'm big on Michael Johnson this week, but if you disagree with me, I just think the fight in general. I like the lean towards Petrosyan, but same thing. I just think that fight as well. Those are the two starting points that I would get to. And then I'd pick a high-priced option that you really like. Personally, despite it being his UFC debut, I'm going to get behind Carlos Prates quite a bit.
Favorite inside the distance fights. For me, I would say Bryczek Potieria, Johnson Flowers, Pauga Guskov will be the ones I would really be looking at.
Yeah, I'm with you with the Potieria Bryczek fight, the Flowers Johnson fight. Prates Giles is a big one. And then like Vieira Petrosyan. I think that a finish does come. One way or another, there is volatility.
Live dogs here. I would put Jack Hermansson in that. If he can stretch this out into the third, fourth, or fifth round, I think he is live very much in that. Petrosyan, I mean, you are getting plus money there at plus 100. To me, he would be one. And I would say Jeremiah Wells would be my other one. Or excuse me, Max Griffin.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you. I'm going Guskov. I'm going Petrosyan and Potieria, despite the volatility. But the Hermansson one is one where I wouldn't fault you.
Punt plays that could break the slate.
Yeah, it's probably Bruna Brasil. I think nobody's going to get behind her. And I'm telling you, from Fighting Nerds, they're so smart that they practice game plans like every team does, but they are like diligent about it.
Favorite fighters with the best decision odds. I'll just say this in terms of I think the co-main event likely goes to decision. Tavares Rodrigues goes to decision. Griffin Wells, Lookboonmee, and Brazil I think would be my highest fights to go to decision.
I agree.
Favorite captains for captain mode. I've not looked at salaries. If Devin Clark's a part of that captain contest, I think that's somebody to potentially look at just in terms of that takedown value and potentially being able to rack up a ton there. Michael Johnson could be a very interesting captain play.
Yeah, I mean, I like him. Man, it would suck to get single-digit Michael Johnson production as it's happened plenty of times.
8.5 is his number for finishes. We got 14 fights.
I'm gonna go less.
Um,
I'm going less, man. 8.5's a big number.
yeah, I gotta go less too. Value plays underneath 8K on DraftKings and a core 3 on DraftKings. In terms of value plays for me, I think I got to look at Michael Johnson at 8,300. I like that as a value play. Vieira or Petrosyan, either one of them, depending on how you see that fight going. I mean, and I think you just brought up a great point. Like, that is a great way to start your lineup construction. Instead of, I think for the most part, usually we start construction with our most confident, usually a 9,000 type play. But I think this is one of those weeks where I think you look at those two fights, and that's where, to me, I think the roster construction starts.
Yeah, and then it's also a great way to get different is by avoiding that fight in hopes that it's only 80 points. Yeah. But I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, a core 3 for me on DraftKings, I would say Johnson,
Prates, and Petrosyan for me.
Yeah, Prates was going to be my second one. My third one, probably Pyfer.
Okay,
but I want to get away from that ownership. Like if it's a cash game, I don't want to get away from Pyfer. But like in GPPs, that's where I would kind of want to eliminate my ownership there as well. Best leverage play. To me, it's 2 fights. As I'm looking at ownership right now, Johnson, Flowers, Pauga, Guskov. I think those are the 4 fighters to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly Trevin Giles. I don't know how many people are going to be backing him this week. I'm not. But stranger shit has happened inside the UFC's octagon. Yeah. So,
best takedown upside. I think you got to look at
Devin Clark.
Yeah. Devin Clark, definitely on that one. And then ranking the 9K options. So we've got Pyfer, Rodrigues, Prates, Oki, Lookboonmee, and Marcos.
Prates 1 for me.
Mm-hmm. It's a tough one because, like, I probably put Marcos at the bottom.
Yep. No, I'm putting Lookboonmee at the bottom.
I think they're your last 2 in your list.
Agreed.
And then agreed. I think it's.
I might go Oki 2.
I would go Prates, Pyfer, Oki, Rodrigues, Lookboonmee, Marcos.
I don't hate it. Yeah.
Get some question here. Matt, is USADA done? Is there Yes, there's testing still happening. It's not done by USADA. It's a new program that went into effect on January 1. Ryan says 1 value option, 1 MVP option for FanDuel. In terms of FanDuel, the value options to me, good. I mean, Hermansson $13, Andre Fili $12. I mean, you look at underdogs, main event, co-main event, and extreme value over there. Other values, I think when you look at over on FanDuel, maybe Bogdan Gustav at $15 is someone to pay attention there. In terms of
Bogdan, man.
MVP, maybe someone like a Devin Clark at $20, maybe someone to get there in terms of that one. But I think that pretty much got all the questions. I'm just going to do a double check here, make sure I didn't miss any questions, but I think that was pretty much it. Of course, we got that DraftKings contest. You can sign up for that. The link to that is in the description below if you're watching us here on YouTube, or if you want to check those show notes, if you're listening to us on the podcasting platforms. Of course, we also got those deals at Stochasticast for all those tools that they have over there. Of course, those are tools that I use to help develop my lineup. So I use wide-ranging things, and also I'll be developing my various groups for multi-entries. Usually I'll do that on Saturday morning, kind of put my lineups together there. Of course, if you ever got a question for myself or Pete or anybody in the community, go hop in that Discord, totally free to join. Pete, anything else you want to mention before we get out of here?
No, man. I'm excited to see if I kind of was overthinking this card or if I'm kind of like right on. And I'm pretty confident. So I'm excited.
I am excited to watch this one tomorrow afternoon. Lock is at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's going to do it for this edition of the Fight HQ podcast. We'll be back next week to get you ready for UFC 298, which we might as well call, boy, the challenger in the main event. Confidence is not an issue.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think you got to worry about confidence when it comes to Ilya Taporia. That boy's got some confidence. And by the way, there is a great video that Volk has put out there today about people saying he's too old. So you got to check out that in terms of that one. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Fight HQ podcast. We will talk to you next week right here on Fight HQ.